Welcome to the Sourcing Exchange, where we connect, share and discuss insights that shape the future of sourcing in the apparel industry.
Paul, thanks very much for joining me today. And as I mentioned, we're going to create what's called a sourcing exchange. I've found that the sourcing industry attracts really colourful and wonderful characters. And the conversations are really very interesting and always kind of uplifting. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. I thought, just as an opening, maybe you can introduce yourself so people can get to know who you are. A little bit about your background would be great.
Sure. So my name is Paul Bowes, and I've been working in the apparel industry for more years than I really want to tell you, but probably about 40 odd years now. Started way back with a sponsorship at a university in the UK, my clothing training board, and it kind of evolved from there into work in manufacturing, in warehousing, in supply chain, in PLM systems. And then I had the good fortune to move overseas from the UK and do some consulting work through Sri Lanka and Vietnam and Bangladesh, and ended up working with Walmart in their sourcing operation, running the quality team for what they call soft lines, and also the manufacturing excellence team, which we structured up whilst I was there. And then Target came along and asked me to set up a manufacturing excellence team within Target to support the vendor base and the factories in driving their improvements as well. So I ended up in Target and recently finished with Target, and now kind of working on whatever the next steps will be.
Hey, you mentioned something at the beginning that I find quite interesting at the minute. You started out with something like an apprenticeship, if I understand correctly. You can correct me in a tick, but common discussion within our industry is who's going to bring the craft, how's the craft going to get taught to the new generation, who we understand are more interested in white collar work, not necessarily getting into the factories, not into the on-site operations. Maybe you can just share a little bit about how was that experience and how was it in shaping, I guess, the professional you've become now, and maybe if you want to dabble in, what's your observation on how talent development should be thought about at this moment in time, which is really, really quite different.
Yeah, I think that whole early days setup set me up for everything in the future in a lot of ways. When I look back, I did a university course called Industrial Technology and Management. So it was a balance between management, leadership training and courses around that, and engineering type courses. So we did all kinds of weird stuff like materials technology and structural dynamics of bridges and all kinds of stuff. But within that, one of the opportunities was to get a scholarship from the Clothing and Allied Products Industry Training Board in the UK. And being a student, you want to get money wherever you can. There was no connections, there was no kind of requirements to stay on in the industry, but the aim was to try and get people interested, graduates interested, because honestly, it was the same then. If you could leave and go into finance, you could leave and go into finance, or leave and go into some kind of white collar work, you probably would. So the aim was to try and get people interested more in the manufacturing side, more in the working side from a kind of the clothing industry point of view as well. And so we took the scholarship, and my university course involved 2 6-month working placements, which was quite unusual at the time, but was really good. So I had 2 opportunities to work within clothing companies in the UK. And one was a kind of ladies apparel company that was very tailored. So it was making very high quality ladies coats and blouses and jackets. And the second one was, interestingly, more a mass market supplier. But what it did was, in both cases, it gave me an insight into what the industry was about. And then as I came towards the end of my university time, the offer came from Courtaulds, a big textile company and apparel manufacturer in the UK at that time, to join an industrial engineering team that they were setting up. And so they brought an American guy in to structure up this whole industrial engineering function within their business. And they were recruiting talent from universities to come in. So I got involved with them, and took a role in their industrial engineering thing. And the training that they gave me was literally ran over about 3 years. And every year we'd go through 3 or 4 on-site training courses, and off-site training courses. In the meantime, I had to do a job as an industrial engineer, which was kind of a lot of work study. So timing people, looking at operations, identifying inefficiencies, looking at processes, and identifying improvement opportunities. Because even at that time, there was no difference in terms of the fact that we were looking to save money. We were looking to drive cost out of the businesses. And even my boss actually said to me, when I said to him, what's my job? What am I getting measured on? And he said, well, look, every year we need to save 10% of the cost of running this factory. Otherwise, profit goes out the window. And we don't make that much profit already. So that was the whole rationale behind it. And from there, really, those tools and techniques and methodologies have evolved into things more like lean, which is, I think, a broader concept, and the tools of like the goal, the Eli Goldratt work, a theory of constraints, and they've kind of evolved into that, but the core is the same. The core is the same: understanding processes, understanding the activities within the process, understanding what's value added. I mean, at the time, interestingly, we were doing non-value added versus value added analysis, and this was in the 80s.
Let me ask you a question, and the question around the youth for today, I'm going to come back to later, but I want to jump in on this point. What seems to be happening is this industrial engineering craft that you're sharing with us here. It's now moving. I think it's been commonly embedded within manufacturing. We're now starting to see it more and more in retailers. My observation anyway is perhaps 3 in 10 retailers have an industrial engineering team who have a remit to bring perhaps what has traditionally been a manufacturing craft into the sourcing office. What can you share about that transition?
Yeah, I think the manufacturing side, I think we've lost a lot in the manufacturing side still. So I would look at the industrial engineering, what they call industrial engineering now, and to me, it's more like calculating how long it takes to make a garment. It's more like a GST analysis or a time analysis of the operations of a garment. And then they go, okay, use that to balance a line, use that to work out an efficiency. That's not really what industrial engineering's about, because they should be taking that product and really analyzing and saying, again, within this, what's the most effective way of making it? What's the most efficient way of making it? What's non-value added? What's really delivering value to the end customer?
So you're really integrating the product development. It sounds like you're integrating the product development with the manufacturing, if I understand correctly. So thinking about the shirt that you're wearing, the amount of craftsmanship that's required in the shirt, which the customer values relative to the brand. Is that right? Is it bringing the two together, or am I misunderstanding a little?
I think, I think it's a good call out. That's where I think it needs to go. I'm not sure it's there yet. I still think and feel we're very functionally based. So you were talking about sourcing, and the reason I think that more and more sourcing operations are starting to think about industrial engineering, manufacturing excellence, value and cost optimization, which is where most of it ends up in the end, is really because there isn't that depth of understanding in product development or product design to say, well, wait a minute, if you change that a little bit, then it's going to not be significantly different.
And I'd argue the tooling's not there either, right? Like it's not easy for a designer, because when you're doing that, you're trying to understand the cost associated with a design change in the factory. And I think everyone's aiming to bring that all together, but I haven't seen that as a solution.
And I think that's definitely something, I must admit, that's something that as I kind of move forward, it's an area I'd like to focus on a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, and again, it kind of is based off functionality or functions. So I'm a product designer. I like Adobe Photoshop, and I like a CAD tool of some kind, or I like a Browseware or Optitex or whatever. I'm a product developer, and I like Browseware or Optitex. None of those tools then help me cost the product.
Right.
So now I've got to go and do something on a spreadsheet, or now I have a PLM system. Oh, I need to put my bill of materials into that. That's somebody else's job. And then somebody else's job to then kind of look at that and work out, does it make sense? Is it manufacturable? Can you make money out of it? Does it fit the price point? And still give you the margin? I think we need to start bringing all those tools in some way together, so that as a designer is designing a product, in the background, things are popping up and going, right, the cost of this is now, using that fabric, the cost of this is now $4.30. Now you've added those components, it's $5.10. Now you've added the labor costs for those operations that will go into that, takes it up to $7.80, whatever. And so it builds in the background, giving them the insights as they're designing things to where they can get to and how much extra value they can add while still maintaining the price point they want and the margin they want to get.
And if we can layer in, I think we're getting close, to be honest. It's not that far away. And if we can layer in carbon, I think that's...
Well, interestingly, one of the things we were looking at a lot in my past role was the data sources of information now, and how you get data to back up that. So and that's what the key to a lot of this is. What is the utilization of this shirt? What is the optimum utilization for making this shirt? What's the cost of the buttons? What's the cost of the labor, depending on what's the cost of the labor depending on which country you're making it in? What operations would they have within that country compared to another country? So all of that is data that is built up, and it's probably there, but again in disparate places. So Excel spreadsheets, or maybe in kind of GSD type tools, or other similar tools that are creating standard minute values. So that if we can start to build that data, then putting it into an overarching tool that will bring it together shouldn't be too difficult. And you're right, all the tools are there. What they've not been able to do yet, I don't think, is gather the data continuously and then make it automatically pull in when somebody's starting up something. So I do think that's the next step, and I do think that's a massive opportunity. Whoever cracks that one is got a world beater.
I think so, Paul. If we loop it back, let's loop it back to the industrial engineering in retail.
Right.
Let me ask you a challenging question, right? Maybe it's not that challenging, but I think retailers will use more and more industrial engineering, and to a degree, it's somewhat required if we're going to take advantage of where technology is going. Right, we're going to need a more engineered approach to sourcing. At the moment, though, what I do notice is not many companies know how to use industrial engineering in a way that's highly scalable. So I see a lot of retailers working with 2 or 3 suppliers. I have a personal view that it's perhaps a little bit more easier to get scale out of fabric, because you can make a lot of fabric decisions in a centralized capacity and then reach all the mills. Where I think, when I think of the production, the tier 1 factories, if you have to work with a factory one by one, you can get scale if you get across your top 20 factories, I guess, because the top 20 factories no doubt represent perhaps 40 or 50% of the volume. But that would be kind of one of my challenges to.
It's a tricky one because anybody who's got volume has generally quite a few factories that they're working with. And so to be able to scale this kind of work, I think first you need to kind of take a step back and say, well, what do you want to achieve from it? And part of that is, I think a lot of the retail side, as they get into this and sourcing side, want to understand more the end-to-end cost base and supply chain cost base. And we're getting, if you look at, I think most retailers now and most brands are having to think about ethical sourcing, responsibility in the supply chain. We've always had to think about underage labor and paying the right wages and all that kind of stuff, which totally should be not even a question. But then we're also getting into, you always got quality and quality tracking and quality monitoring and all those quality tools that get implemented. And then we get other, and then sourcing start asking questions as well. So I think one of the opportunities to be able to scale some of this is to take a step back and go, all right, what do we want to achieve with it? And how do we build it into work that we're doing, the work that we have to do, and not have it as necessarily another function. And maybe I'm putting myself out of a job again here, but don't have it as another function, but work on how it all comes together. And again, one of the thoughts I've had in terms of moving forward and my next steps is just to look at really how we eliminate quality as apologies, quality teams, but as a function, and replace that with an achievement of specification. Because that's very definable. Quality is still kind of, questionable. And if you look at, there was an article on LinkedIn the other day, very insightful one, that was talking about AQL and how really now we need to get rid of AQL because people buy one shirt. They don't buy 100 shirts and then pick out the ones that have the best quality. They'll buy one and they expect that to be right to the spec that and the aesthetic that they have bought it to. So how do we move away from thinking about quality in terms of what's acceptable to a right to specification, correct to specification? And then it comes back to product development. What is the specification we really want? And then it builds into how do you achieve that specification? And so that gets back into industrial engineering and lean manufacturing or lean supply chains. So how do you actually achieve the specification you want? And it needs to really start at the very beginning with that product design and development and getting all that really defined in a lot more detail. I think there's sometimes the businesses work at so much speed, such a high speed, that it's kind of like, well, this is what I want. Okay, fine. But somebody else has to sort out how we achieve that. And it's thrown over the wall. And by the time you really want to say, well, if you don't put 3 pockets on that, if you put 2 pockets on or a false pocket, you're going to achieve the same aesthetic, but save a whole bunch of money, make it easier to manufacture, then and make it more sustainable even maybe, then it's too late because everybody's moved on. The design team have moved on to the next thoughts and the next way of working. So I think we have to find ways of helping design and development teams really understand what they're asking for and how that relates to value and the value that they want to deliver to the customer, and understand what's the implications of that in the supply chain.
If we swing it to sustainability, what do you think the current state of play is, at least from your angle, working at Target previously, or more? Feel free to tackle it from a more global perspective if you wish. What do you think the current state of play is in how companies are progressing on the sustainability ambitions?
I think again the focus is a lot more at the front end and actually in the middle. And it's always easier, I think, to start with manufacturing because it's pretty well defined what you're doing. I think again that's something that in terms of product development should be starting to build up and should be one of those pop-ups that come up as I'm designing this shirt. Oh, you know what? This is going to be a garment wash. It's going to have this finish. It's going to have that. That's going to have this kind of carbon impact. And that's actually calculable now through certain systems already. That's available again. So again, bringing all that together at the front end in terms of development, highlighting to designers and developers, hey, look, this is the environmental impact of this product that you're having. And then I think to switch it to the other end of the chain, from a retail perspective, what frustrates me with all retailers is the amount of waste of that in that part of the supply chain. So large organizations that don't buy individual pieces or supply individual pieces, a lot of the time they end up discounting stock to clear it. They end up throwing it away into landfill or giving it away to charities, which then may be able to use it or may end up in landfill again. And so how do we, again, going back to industrial engineering and kind of the lean evolution of that, how do you much better pull from a customer purchase through your supply chain? Because I think sourcing is still a push at the minute. Let's make it, push it, see how it goes. And we want the responsiveness quickly. If it sells well, how do we make more? So we can get more money, obviously. If it doesn't sell well, how do we stop quickly so we're not wasting money? And the whole supply chain we've built on a low-cost base doesn't give us that. But if we actually said, let's say 15 to 20% of all product is marked down or is thrown away, if you could actually take that money and sell through at 100%, what could you do with the rest of the supply chain to make it much more of a pull? And that's starting to happen. And I think part of the Trump agenda actually is pushing this in some ways. People are moving more to Latin American countries, to Mexico is developing massively at the minute. All that region is really evolving because they can get closer to the customer. And going back to my very early days, again, I used to run a factory in the UK. We manufactured product for Marks and Spencer's. Every Sunday, our sales team would get the Marks and Spencer sales of the products that we were manufacturing, and by size, color, and style. And then they would immediately come to me as a factory manager and say on a Monday and say, do you know what? This style, size medium, selling very well. Size extra large, we've got like 8 weeks stock. So slow down on the extra large, pick up on the medium. And because we were in the same country, we were local, I could within a week pretty much respond to that and get product back in to the supply chain for Marks and Spencer to make better sales and better sales judgment. And so we were continually balancing back. And that to me, I remember back to that. I was like, wow, what a great.
Can I share on we did a project looking at onshoring in the US as well as nearshoring from Central America through to South America, for example. The thing that we found that the biggest stumbling block is, particularly when you talk about large retailers, is getting sufficient capacity. I think there's all sorts of challenges if we just talk about North America. Europe's interesting because Europe's already gone in that direction quite a way. I know most companies have at least 10% near or onshore. Some companies in the luxury space much higher than that. North America seemed to struggle a little more for a range of reasons. What do you think? do you think, is it potentially an opportunity for small to medium-sized companies to perhaps take market share because they don't have the same scalability issue? But when I think of a Target, when I think of a Walmart, it's just finding capacity to service that.
Yeah, I think it's product by product.
Yeah.
So clearly, you're not going to make white underwear, men's underwear, in a high cost labor country, or you don't really need to make it close to the marketplace because you can manage the flow of goods through the process, and you can always keep balancing back. It doesn't matter if you've got 5 or 6 weeks on the ocean of product, volume of product, you can balance back your sales and kind of slow down and get that through. If you're selling graphic T-shirts that are to do with the launch of a new movie, hey, I would go as local as you can. Maybe you still make the T-shirts.
That's a good example.
Somewhere overseas, but you're printing them much closer to the US, much closer to the market, so that that if a particular size is selling better or a particular graphic is selling better, you can just print more of that and slow down on other stuff. So, and it kind of brings me, I guess, it's another kind of opportunity point that I do feel we're not yet there with, especially in large retail organizations, is how you customize, close to the consumer or the customer. So even if they're buying a lampshade, why do we not sell them a white lampshade and then have the ability to print it? What do you want? A print of your family on the lampshade, or your favorite pet, or a night scene, so when you turn it on, it looks like stars on the roof. We need to be able to get to that kind of personalization and customization, I think, opportunity. Even if it's just embroidery or, as I say, printing or whatever else. And I think that's still a missed opportunity in a lot of cases. But I would, if it was me, look at how you nearshore or localize things that are fast moving, more of the stuff that's going to come and go, the fashion items, and stuff that's core. Make it overseas, make it in your lower cost countries.
Hey, what can you share with us about, let's say, Mexico, for example? I think when I talk to most people, rightly or wrongly, they lack confidence in moving sourcing to Mexico. It sounds like you've had perhaps a more positive experience, perhaps, but what's your kind of summary of where they're at?
Not had a lot of experience with Mexico, to be honest. So I think it's really kind of kicking off now. And I actually got the opportunity to go a few years back, well, maybe about 10 years ago. And I still think it's early days in Mexico. It's a good opportunity area, but there's a lot of challenges, as there are with a lot of kind of developing countries and growing countries. But I look at that. I look at places like now everybody's saying go to Egypt because it's only 10% duty. Get out of Egypt. But you've got to really go for it in a big way. You've got to have the commitment to run with it for a few years, a good few years, I think, and make I think it's more about the strategy and saying, look, we're going to buy into this in a big way and commit to it. And you're right. I mean, Mexico has a lot of work to do. I think it's kind of like Vietnam was when everybody went, oh, we're leaving China and we're going to Vietnam. Suddenly everybody goes to Vietnam. There's not enough people. There's not enough factories. Factories are growing everywhere. People are getting grabbed from villages. Come and work for us. Come and work for us. People are moving factory to factory every few weeks because they can get a better pay. And the danger is it kind of goes like that. So I think Mexico's a great opportunity. Who can tell with the current leader of the free world?
True. Hey, let me hit you up with two more questions and we'll wrap up. The beginning, I was asking about new people entering the industry So maybe the question here is, what advice would you give people who have some interest in this fashion industry, in particular the craft of sourcing or industrial engineering?
It's a tricky one now, because you're right. People, I think generally, the graduates, even if they went into industry, would be more interested in the electronics industries, the car industries, those kind of things. I think I would say that this is actually an exciting industry to get involved with, and I think right now is actually more exciting than ever before. The changes going on in the way sourcing is operating, in the way that where product is coming from, in the supply chain, the thought process around the supply chain versus a factory versus a sewing line versus a cutting room, whatever, is something that people are really getting into at the minute. And I believe if we can pitch it in a way to graduates and that are coming out now to say, look, we're not bringing you to a factory. I don't think many people want to go into a factory with a stopwatch like I did and go, I'm going to spend 8 hours a day timing everybody. Those days are really gone. But understanding the end-to-end process, that's the end-to-end supply chain, and working out how that operates for a particular product, I think that would be far more interesting for graduates to work on. And going back to the function versus supply, sort of supply chain discussion I mentioned earlier, responsible sourcing and then quality and then manufacturing excellence. So many people are kind of getting involved. How do you holistically pull that together and go, well, within the supply chain, what do we need to do together to do this? And let's get some supply chain specialists sorted out, rather than somebody who can just make the garment in the minimum number of standard minutes. Because that isn't really going to help you if you then put that product into a warehouse for 4 weeks, waiting for somebody to buy it, and call it off with a PO, and then it's going to ship for another 6 weeks, and then you're going to find out if it sells. That's not great. But if you're working on an end-to-end solution for a supply chain, and you can bring new graduates in with a thought process of that, all right, design a supply chain that really is the optimum for everybody involved, that can deliver.
What I hear is, sorry to interrupt there. What I hear is, what you prompt me to think about is, the people we're referring to don't have to be. It's awesome if you're interested in fashion, if you're interested in design, if you're interested in how factories run. Terrific. But a lot of what you referred to is perhaps people who are data scientists, or people who just have an interest in how you orchestrate things. This could appeal. I mean, I think it's obvious that the future talent is going to come with a lot of those skills that the industry hasn't been built on, really.
I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think that's an opportunity, because I think part of the challenge in a lot of industry is, and again, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you go to factories, people go, well, this is the way we do it. And that still happens, even though people go, yes, we've got a growth mindset. Yes, we're looking for look, we bought an automated cutting table and it links directly to our CAD system. Well, hang on, we were doing that 25 years ago. That isn't new. If you've only just bought into that, then you're way behind the curve. Really thinking about the whole supply chain again. And I think that's where the opportunity is to get people excited and involved. And it may be, I think it certainly involves like data sciences and that, but you want kind of process engineers who are able to think much more holistically. And when we get that, what that does then is it brings together responsible sourcing. Oh, I need to know where all this is coming from. Fine, we've mapped the supply chain. We can tell you. Oh, cost, we need to know the cost of it. We've mapped the supply chain. We can tell you. Oh, quality, we know where this is coming from. We've mapped the supply chain. We can tell you about the specification of that all the way through, and are we achieving it? So all of those things start to become much more grouped and like an ecosystem when you understand the whole supply chain and when you're able to map it.
Yeah, and it jumps out to me that the other thing I'd add in there is that people who are interested in change management, people who want to think about the soft skill side of things, because all the things you mentioned are exciting and true, but I love that story that you referred to about people buying it, the new piece of kit, uh, which to me was a bit of a change management story. It's hard to get people to want to move to this new way of working, but the last question I have for you is just more an open question. Was there anything about where we're going in an industry, as an industry, that we haven't talked about today that was on your mind that you thought it would be good to to touch on?
Yeah. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk AI.
Yes.
And interestingly, I was just reading an article from Gartner. They just issued their 2025 Supply Chain Excellence Awards. And one of the things they talk about is this agentic AI.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think over the next 5 years or so, AI is going to revolutionize a lot of this work.
Yeah.
Even now, one of the sourcing leaders that I work with went into something like ChatGPT and said, if I want to get this product from to North America, the cheapest and quickest route, what should the supply chain be?
Mm-hmm.
And it analyzed and said, oh, you should get the material from China, or you ship it to Vietnam to make it cheapest, and then ship it. Or if you want it, the shortest, you should do it this way. And I think that as that knowledge builds up within there, the use of AI will become incredible for as a tool to use. I don't think it'll take away the need for knowledge of knowledgeable people, but the way to use it and the way to operate it will become critical in the future. And I think AI, that's one of the big things that I would say is a major opportunity again.
So the guy behind the camera is our AI specialist. It could be a good opportunity. You can answer that question if you wish. Sorry, you can join the discussion if you wish.
I mean, I know we're building the supply chain kind of mapping tools, and
we at the moment we're in the middle of designing our point of view on what we call it intelligent sourcing and supply chain for 2027. And the reason we use the word intelligent is because first of all, the future is the use of a blend of new technologies, not just generative AI or machine learning, but it's a variety of techniques, and even some of the old techniques we still think still have a place. But another key element is people. We think it's the intersection of technology and people. So we use this umbrella term, intelligent sourcing and supply chain. The big question, we kind of have a view on what it'll look like in the future. Actually, maybe a bigger question for us is how quick it comes about, because as you can imagine, from being a service provider, we don't want to be too early because we could lose a lot of money, and we don't want to be too late because then we definitely lose out. And so understanding when we see the more significant changes come to fruition is a tough question. But on the flip side, what I'm noticing is, sometimes when you climb a mountain and you're walking along the top, when you look forward, everything looks flat, as though not much is changing. But when you turn around, you've already made significant steps forward. And I think what I'm observing is there's already a lot of intelligent tooling use cases or AI use cases. There's a lot of them. And the story that you told somewhere at the beginning about if we're using 3D design tools and we're using GSD engineering time standards and we're using lecturer consumption standards, I think with all of these use cases, at some point, they create the foundation for the more radical or disruptive changes that I personally foresee. So I think we're more within arm's reach than maybe we realise.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're close. I think all the building blocks are there.
Mhm.
What we need to find out, what we need to do is bring them all together.
Yeah.
And somebody, to your point, somebody to really take the initiative and
Mhm.
say, look, I've got a system or a tool or a suite of systems that once you put this in, it will give you this, it will give you this, it will guide you on that, it will give you this. And I think all the building blocks are there. I think we just need somebody, and again, I'm trying to get away from this function to
Yeah.
say my function is to design a product.
Yeah.
My function is to make the patterns. My function is to do the markers and cost it and
Yeah.
cost the material utilization. No.
Mhm.
As we're designing a product, we should be understanding the consumption. We should be understanding the impact on the environment. We should be
Yeah.
understanding where we can get it from.
Mhm.
If we wanted the fastest route, if we wanted the lowest price route, if we want it, and what's the dangers of those things, the risks inherent. And I think we're close to that. All the elements are there. As I say, we just need somebody to take the initiative and go,
Yeah.
let's build it.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much. Totally love the conversation. This is why we were motivated to do this series, is because sourcing in fashion, you can just talk about 1,000 things, really. Hey, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for the invite.